My daughter-in-law spit on my plate in front of the whole family. Everyone expected me to cry or scream, but what I did was much worse. I never thought a single glob of spit could change my entire life, but there I was, staring down at my Sunday roast, watching my daughter-in-law's saliva slowly sink into my mashed potatoes, while 12 family members sat frozen around my dining room table. The silence was so thick you could have cut it with the carving knife I was still holding. And for the first time in 68 years, I understood what it meant to feel completely, utterly alone in a room full of people who were supposed to love me. My name is Margaret Sullivan, and I've been the glue holding this family together since before most of them were born. I raised 4 children on my own after their father died in a construction accident when the youngest was barely 3. I built a small catering business from scratch in my kitchen, working 18-hour days to keep food on the table and roofs over their heads. I paid for college educations, wedding deposits, down payments on houses, and more emergency loans than I could count. I hosted every holiday, every birthday, every celebration for 37 years without missing a single one. I was the person everyone called when they needed money, advice, babysitting, or just someone to listen to their problems at 2 a.m. But apparently, that didn't buy me basic respect in my own home. The spit was still there, glistening under my chandelier like some twisted garnish, and I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd react. Would I cry? Would I scream? Would I throw my plate against the wall like my grandmother used to do when she got really mad? I could see my oldest son, Michael, shifting uncomfortably in his chair, his wife, Sandra, the spitter herself, sitting there with her arms crossed like she'd done something brave instead of something disgusting. My daughter, Rebecca, was covering her mouth with her napkin, her eyes wide with shock. My youngest son, David, looked like he wanted to disappear entirely, and my daughter-in-law, Kelly, was staring at her lap like she'd never seen her own hands before. The thing is, this didn't come out of nowhere. Sandra had been pushing boundaries for months, maybe even years, but so gradually that I'd convinced myself I was imagining things. Little comments about how my cooking wasn't as good as her mother's. Suggestions that maybe I was getting too old to host such large gatherings. Questions about whether I really needed such a big house now that I was living alone. Eye rolls when I shared stories about my grandchildren that she thought were boring. Interrupting me mid-sentence when I was talking to her children, my own grandchildren, as if my voice didn't matter in conversations about their lives. But today had been different from the moment they walked through my door. The argument started over something so stupid, I almost laugh when I think about it now. My grandson Tommy, Sandra and Michael's boy, had mentioned that he was thinking about studying business in college, and I'd made the mistake of saying that if he ever wanted to learn about running a small business, I'd be happy to teach him everything I knew about the catering company I'd built from nothing. Sandra's face had changed instantly. "Oh, Margaret, I don't think Tommy needs to worry about that kind of thing. We're hoping he'll aim a little higher than local catering. Maybe something more professional." The way she said professional made it sound like I'd spent 30 years flipping burgers at McDonald's instead of building a business that put 4 kids through college and paid for the house we were all sitting in. But I bit my tongue the way I always did, because keeping the peace was more important than defending myself. That's what I told myself anyway. The conversation moved on, but Sandra kept making these little digs. When I mentioned that I was thinking about remodeling my kitchen, she suggested I might want to consider moving somewhere smaller instead, somewhere more appropriate for a woman my age. When I brought up a trip, I was planning to visit my sister in Arizona. She wondered aloud if I should really be traveling alone at my age. When I offered to help with the dishes, she actually laughed and said maybe I should save my energy for things that were more important. I should have said something then. I should have asked her what she meant, or told her that in my house, I decide what's important. But I didn't. I just kept smiling and nodding and pretending that each little cut wasn't drawing blood. The conversation that led to the spitting incident started innocently enough. Rebecca had mentioned that she and her husband were looking at buying a bigger house, and I'd offered to help with the down payment, the same way I'd helped all my children over the years. It wasn't charity, it was family. It was what you do when you have the means and your children need help. But Sandra apparently saw it differently. "Margaret, Don't you think it's time you stop treating your children like they can't manage their own lives? They're all grown adults with their own families now. Maybe you should focus on enjoying your retirement instead of trying to control everyone else's decisions. The word control hit me like a slap. Control? I'd been helping, supporting, loving. I'd been doing what mothers do, what grandmothers do. I'd been putting my family first, the way I'd been taught, the way I'd lived my entire adult life. But to Sandra, apparently, that was control. I'm not trying to control anyone, I said quietly, keeping my voice steady, even though my hands were starting to shake. I'm just offering to help my daughter the same way I've helped all of my children over the years. Sandra leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Yes, and maybe that's the problem. Maybe if you stopped throwing money at every little problem, your children would learn to stand on their own 2 feet instead of running to mommy every time they need something. The room went completely silent. Even the children stopped talking and looked up from their plates. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. This woman, this person I'd welcomed into my family, fed at my table, helped financially when she and Michael were struggling, was sitting in my dining room, eating food I'd prepared with my own hands, telling me that loving my children was somehow wrong. Sandra, Michael said quietly, maybe we should... No, she snapped, not taking her eyes off me. I'm tired of tiptoeing around this. Your mother has been manipulating this family for years with her money and her guilt trips and her constant need to be the center of attention. Every holiday, every celebration, every family decision has to revolve around what Margaret wants, what Margaret thinks, what Margaret feels. Well, maybe it's time someone told the truth. I felt something crack inside my chest, like a bone breaking, not just from her words, but from the silence that followed them. Nobody jumped to my defense. Nobody told her she was wrong, or out of line, or that she needed to apologize. My own son, my firstborn, the child I'd held in my arms when he was sick, the boy I'd worked 3 jobs to support, just sat there looking uncomfortable while his wife tore me apart with words that felt designed to destroy everything I thought I knew about my role in this family. The truth? I heard myself saying, and my voice sounded strange, like it was coming from someone else. You want to talk about the truth? I stood up slowly, my legs unsteady, and walked to the kitchen. I could hear Sandra saying something behind me, but the words sounded muffled, like I was underwater. I opened the cabinet where I kept my important papers, the ones I'd been meaning to organize for months, but never found the time because I was always too busy taking care of everyone else's needs. I pulled out a folder, a thick one, and walked back to the dining room. The truth, I said, setting the folder on the table, is that this house is mine, bought and paid for with money from my catering business. The truth is that the down payment on your house, Sandra, came from my savings account. The truth is that when Michael lost his job 3 years ago, the money that kept your family afloat for 6 months came from me. The truth is that every single person at this table has benefited from my manipulation and my guilt trips and my constant need to be the center of attention. I opened the folder and started pulling out papers, bank statements, canceled checks, loan documents, the paper trail of 37 years of putting everyone else's needs before my own. The truth is that I've given this family everything I had, and I've never asked for anything in return except basic respect. Sandra's face was getting red now, and I could see her jaw clenching. Oh, so now you're going to hold every penny you've ever spent over our heads? That's exactly what I'm talking about. You can't just do something nice without making sure everyone knows about it, without making sure everyone owes you something. That's when something snapped completely. I looked at this woman, this person who had come into my family and my home and taken everything I'd offered, and then decided that my generosity was somehow selfish, my love was somehow controlling, my presence in my own family was somehow inappropriate. I looked at her sitting there in the chair I'd bought, at the table I'd set, eating food I'd cooked, surrounded by people I'd raised and supported and loved unconditionally for decades, and I realized that I was done. You're absolutely right, Sandra, I said, and my voice was perfectly calm now, perfectly clear. I have been doing nice things and expecting something in return. I've been expecting gratitude. I've been expecting respect. I've been expecting to be treated like a human being instead of an ATM with feelings. I started gathering up the papers, putting them back in the folder. And you're also right that I can't just do something nice without making sure everyone knows about it. So let me make sure everyone knows about this. I picked up my water glass and poured it slowly over the papers in front of Sandra, watching the water spread across the table, soaking into the tablecloth my mother had embroidered by hand 60 years ago. Then I picked up my plate, the one with her spit still glistening on my mashed potatoes, and I held it up so everyone could see. "This," I said, "is what your daughter-in-law thinks of me. This is the respect I've earned after 37 years of putting this family first." And that's when Sandra did it. That's when she leaned forward, pursed her lips, and spit directly into my food while looking me straight in the eyes, as if she was daring me to do something about it. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the grandfather clock in the corner seemed to stop ticking. I stood there holding that plate, feeling the weight of it, feeling the weight of 37 years of putting everyone else first, 37 years of swallowing my pride, 37 years of believing that being a good mother and grandmother meant never standing up for myself. Then I set the plate down very carefully, picked up my napkin, and wiped my hands. I looked around the table at all the faces staring back at me. My children, my grandchildren, my daughters-in-law. The family I'd built and supported and loved and sacrificed for, and apparently had no real place in anymore. "Well," I said quietly, "I guess that settles that." I walked to the kitchen, threw my apron in the sink, and picked up my purse from the counter. When I came back to the dining room, nobody had moved. They were all still sitting there, frozen, like someone had cast a spell on them. "Finish your dinner," I told them. "Clean up when you're done. Lock the door when you leave. And don't worry about next Sunday, I'll be making some changes." I drove to the Marriott downtown and checked myself into a suite for the night, something I'd never done in my entire life. 68 years old, and I'd never spent money on myself just because I wanted to. Just because I needed space to think without looking at that dining room table where my own family had watched me get humiliated and done absolutely nothing to stop it. The hotel room was quiet in a way my house never was. No grandfather clock ticking, no refrigerator humming, no sounds of family members calling to ask for favors or money or advice. Just silence, and for the first time in decades, I actually welcomed it. I ordered room service, another first, and sat by the window looking out at the city lights while I ate a meal someone else had prepared for me. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, finally getting waited on, and I had to pay strangers to do what my family should have been doing out of love and respect. My phone started ringing around 8 o'clock. Michael first, then Rebecca, then David. I let every call go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to hear their explanations or their apologies or their attempts to smooth things over like they always did when there was family conflict. This time was different. This time, I needed to think. The voicemails started piling up, Michael sounding panicked. "Mom, where are you? Sandra's really upset. She didn't mean for things to get so out of hand. Can we talk?" Rebecca crying, "Mom, please call me back. I'm so sorry about what happened. This is all just a misunderstanding." David trying to be the peacemaker. "Hey Mom, you know how family dinners can get. Everyone's emotions were running high. Let's all just take a breath and work this out." But the one voicemail that really got to me was from my granddaughter Emma, Rebecca's 16-year-old. "Grandma, I'm sorry everyone was so horrible to you today. That was really messed up, and I wanted you to know that not everyone thinks what happened was okay. I love you." That message made me cry for the first time since I'd left the house. Not because I was sad, but because it reminded me that respect wasn't something you stopped deserving just because you got older, just because you were a woman, just because you'd spent your life putting other people first. Emma understood that, even if the adults in my family apparently didn't. I spent the whole night in that hotel room, and I did something I hadn't done in years. I thought about myself. Not about what my children needed, not about what my grandchildren wanted, not about what would keep the family happy and harmonious. I thought about Margaret Sullivan, the woman who existed before she became a mother, before she became a widow, before she became the family bank and emotional support system and unpaid servant. I remembered the girl who'd started a catering business with nothing but a set of mixing bowls and a dream. I remembered the woman who'd negotiated contracts with local businesses, who'd managed employees, who'd built something from nothing. I remembered being proud of myself, being excited about my own future, having plans that didn't revolve around taking care of other people. When had I stopped being that woman? When had I become this person who apologized for existing, who accepted disrespect because keeping the peace was more important than keeping my dignity? I checked out of the hotel the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I had work to do, and for the first time in a long time, that work was going to be for me. The first thing I did when I got home was walk through every room of my house and really look at it. This was my house. I'd bought it, I'd maintained it, I'd decorated it. But when was the last time I'd made any changes that reflected what I wanted instead of what would make family gatherings more comfortable for everyone else? The dining room still smelled faintly of yesterday's pot roast, and I could see the water stain on the tablecloth where I'd poured my glass out. But instead of feeling angry or hurt, I felt something else. I felt free. I called my lawyer, Harold Peterson, whom I'd known for 25 years. Harold, I need to see you today if possible. I want to review all my financial documents and make some changes to my will. Of course, Margaret. Is everything all right? Everything's about to be, I told him. While I waited for my appointment with Harold, I did something else I'd never done. I went through my house and made a list of everything that was truly mine versus everything I'd bought or kept just to make other people comfortable. The antique rocking chair I'd inherited from my grandmother that nobody ever sat in because it wasn't comfortable enough for modern backs. The china cabinet full of dishes I never used because everyone preferred paper plates for family gatherings since they were easier. The guest bedroom that had become a storage space for my adult children's belongings that they never came to collect but didn't want me to throw away. I started making piles: keep, donate, give back to original owners, sell. The process was liberating in a way I hadn't expected. Each item I put in the donate pile felt like I was removing weight from my shoulders. Each piece of furniture I marked for sell felt like I was reclaiming space in my own life. My phone kept ringing throughout the day, but I kept letting the calls go to voicemail. I wasn't avoiding my family because I was angry, though I was. I was avoiding them because I finally understood that every conversation we'd had for the past several years had been about what they needed from me, never about what I needed from them, and I wasn't ready to fall back into that pattern. The meeting with Harold was eye-opening. When I asked him to go through all my assets, all my investments, all my financial obligations to family members, the picture that emerged surprised even me. Margaret, he said, spreading papers across his desk, you're significantly more wealthy than you seem to realize. Between your business assets, your property holdings, your investment accounts, and some life insurance policies that have matured, you're looking at a net worth of nearly $2 million. I stared at him. $2 million? Give or take a few $100,000, yes. And that's not counting the properties you inherited from your Aunt Dorothy that you never developed. Those alone could be worth another $500,000 if you decided to sell them. Properties I'd inherited from my Aunt Dorothy? I'd completely forgotten about those. She died 8 years ago and left me some land up north that I'd never visited, never thought about, never considered valuable. Harold, I want you to draw up a new will, and I want you to calculate exactly how much money I've given to my children over the past 10 years. Loans, gifts, down payments, emergency funds, everything. He nodded, making notes. May I ask why? Because I want to make some changes. And I want those changes to be informed by reality, not by guilt or obligation or whatever I've been operating on for the past few decades. When I left Harold's office, I had a list of numbers that shocked me. In the past 10 years alone, I'd given my children over $300,000. Not loaned, given. Money that was never paid back, never acknowledged as anything more than what a mother should do for her children. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. That evening, while I was going through old boxes in my basement, looking for documents Harold had requested, I found a folder I'd forgotten about entirely. It was labeled Business Records, 1987, in my own handwriting, and when I opened it, I found contracts and correspondence from the year my catering business had nearly gone under. I'd forgotten about that year, or maybe I'd tried to forget about it. Michael had been in his second year of college, Rebecca was starting high school, and both younger kids were still elementary age. The business had 3 major clients cancel their contracts within the same month, and suddenly I was facing bankruptcy and the possibility of losing everything I'd worked for. But reading through these old papers, I remembered what I'd done. I'd mortgaged the house, maxed out every credit card I could get, and used the money to fulfill contracts I'd already signed, even though I was operating at a loss. I'd worked 18-hour days for 8 months straight, taking any job I could get, slowly rebuilding the client base from nothing. What I'd forgotten was the letter at the bottom of the folder. A letter from the bank, dated December 1987, congratulating me on paying off the emergency mortgage 6 months ahead of schedule, and commending me for the remarkable financial recovery of Sullivan Catering Services. I'd saved my business, by myself, with no help from anyone, no loans from family, no bailouts from friends. I'd worked myself nearly to death, but I'd saved everything I'd built, and I'd done it while raising 4 children alone. Why had I forgotten that? Why had I spent 37 years thinking of myself as someone who needed to be grateful for what she had, instead of someone who'd earned every bit of it through her own hard work and determination? I took the letter upstairs and put it on my kitchen table where I could see it while I made dinner. For the first time in 3 days, I was cooking, but I wasn't cooking for anyone else. I was making exactly what I wanted to eat, the way I wanted to eat it, and I was going to eat it in whatever room of my house I chose, without worrying about setting the table or making sure there was enough for unexpected guests or cleaning up immediately afterward so the kitchen would be ready for the next meal. It was while I was eating my simple dinner of scrambled eggs and toast at my kitchen counter, reading my own letter about my own accomplishments, that I realized something that would change everything. I wasn't done building things. I wasn't done working. I wasn't done being productive and creative and valuable. I was 68, not 98. I had energy and ideas and skills that I'd been treating like they were expired just because my children were grown and my husband was gone. What if Sandra was right about one thing? What if I had been trying to control my family by making myself indispensable? Not intentionally, not maliciously, but what if I'd been so afraid of being left behind, so afraid of becoming irrelevant, that I'd turned myself into a service provider instead of a person? And what if there was another way to be relevant, to be valued, to be needed, that didn't require me to sacrifice my dignity or accept disrespect in exchange for feeling useful? I went to my computer, something I'd been avoiding for years because the kids always said I wasn't good with technology, and I started researching. What were other women my age doing? What businesses were thriving? What opportunities existed that I'd never considered because I'd been too busy being everyone else's solution to their problems? 3 hours later, I had 15 browser tabs open and a notebook full of ideas. Small business loans for seniors, online platforms for artisan foods, farmers markets looking for established vendors, bed and breakfast opportunities, consulting services for people starting their own catering businesses. The world was full of possibilities I'd been too busy to notice, too tired to pursue, too convinced of my own limitations to explore. My phone rang again. Michael. I looked at it for a long moment, then I answered. "Hello, Michael." "Mom, thank God. We've been worried sick. Where have you been? Why haven't you been answering our calls?" "I've been thinking. About what happened at dinner?" "Mom, Sandra feels terrible. She wants to apologize. She never meant for things to escalate like that. You know how she gets when she's stressed and with her job situation and everything?" "Michael," I interrupted, "I don't want to hear about Sandra's stress or her job situation or her apologies. I want to ask you a question." Silence on the other end. "In all the years since your father died, how many times have you asked me how I was doing? Not how I was handling the kids, or how the business was going, or whether I needed help with something. How many times have you asked me what I wanted, what I was thinking about, what my dreams were for my own life?" More silence. "I can't remember," he said finally. "Neither can I told him. "And that's something we're both going to have to think about." I hung up before he could respond, and for the first time in 3 days, I felt like myself again. The next morning, I called Harold back. "Harold, I want you to set up meetings with my children. Individual meetings. In your office, not in my house. I want to discuss their financial expectations from my estate, and I want to make some things very clear about how things are going to work going forward. Margaret, are you sure about this approach? Family conflicts over money can become very complicated. Harold, I've spent 37 years avoiding conflict, and look where it got me. It's time to try a different approach. When would you like these meetings scheduled? As soon as possible. And Harold, I want you to prepare a detailed breakdown of every financial contribution I've made to each of them over the past 10 years. Every loan, every gift, every emergency payment. I want them to see the numbers. After I hung up, I made one more call. To Emma, my granddaughter, the only person in my family who'd called to apologize for what had happened. Grandma, are you okay? Everyone's been freaking out because you disappeared. I'm more than okay, sweetheart. I'm figuring some things out. Can I ask you something? Of course. What do you want to be when you grow up? She laughed. That's kind of a random question, but okay. I want to be a chef. I want to have my own restaurant someday. Have you ever thought about learning the business side of running a restaurant? The real nuts and bolts of how you manage money, handle suppliers, deal with employees, market your services? I mean, yeah, but who would teach me that stuff? I smiled, looking out my kitchen window at the garden I'd neglected for years because I was too busy taking care of everyone else's needs. I think I might know someone, I told her. And for the first time in decades, I started planning for my own future. The meetings with my children didn't go the way any of us expected. Michael came first on a Tuesday morning, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the week since our last conversation. He sat across from Harold's desk, fidgeting with his wedding ring, while Harold laid out the financial documents I'd requested. Your mother has contributed approximately $87,000 to your household over the past 10 years, Harold said matter-of-factly. This includes the $20,000 down payment assistance for your current home, monthly supplements during your unemployment period, emergency funds for medical bills, and several smaller amounts for various needs. Michael's face went white. Mom, I had no idea it was that much. I mean, I knew you helped us out, but... Michael, I interrupted, I'm not showing you this to make you feel guilty. I'm showing you this because I want you to understand something. I've been treating you like a child who can't manage his own finances, and you've been letting me. That stops now. He stared at me. What do you mean? I mean that from now on, you're going to handle your own financial emergencies. I'm not your backup plan anymore. I'm not your safety net. If you and Sandra want to make decisions about how your family spends money, you get to live with the consequences of those decisions without calling me to fix them. But Mom, what if there's a real emergency? What if something happens that we can't handle? I looked at my oldest son, this 42-year-old man who still thought his mother should solve his problems, and I felt a mixture of love and disappointment that nearly broke my heart. Then you'll figure it out the same way every other adult in the world figures it out. You'll take out a loan, or you'll cut expenses, or you'll ask your wife's family for help. But you won't ask me, because I'm done being the person everyone takes for granted until they need something. The conversation lasted 2 hours. Michael cried. He apologized for Sandra's behavior. He promised things would be different. He begged me to forgive them and come back to family dinners and pretend nothing had happened. But what he never did was ask me how I was feeling. He never asked what I wanted. He never acknowledged that maybe, just maybe, I deserved better treatment than I'd been getting. Rebecca's meeting was worse. She came in with a whole speech prepared about family loyalty and forgiveness and how holding grudges was beneath me. When Harold showed her that she'd received $63,000 from me over the past decade, she actually got angry. You kept track of every penny? You've been keeping score this whole time? No, Rebecca. Harold kept track because that's what accountants do. I gave you that money freely, without keeping score, without expecting anything in return except basic respect and consideration, which apparently was too much to ask. That's not fair, Mom. I've always been respectful. I've never treated you the way Sandra did. You sat there and watched her do it. You sat there while she told me I was manipulative and controlling and trying to buy love with my money. You sat there while she spit in my food. And you said nothing. Rebecca started crying then, the way she'd always cried when she was a little girl and got caught doing something wrong. But I wasn't moved by her tears the way I used to be. I wasn't rushing to comfort her and tell her everything was okay when everything clearly wasn't okay. I didn't know what to do, she sobbed. I was shocked. I've never seen anything like that before. I didn't know how to react. You could have told her she was wrong. You could have asked her to leave. You could have stood up for me the way I've been standing up for all of you your entire lives. The meeting with David was different. He came in defensive, ready for a fight, convinced I was being dramatic and unreasonable. Mom, you're acting like one bad family dinner is the end of the world. Sandra was out of line. Everyone knows that. But this whole thing is getting blown out of proportion. David, let me ask you something. When was the last time you called me just to talk? Not to ask for help with something, not to invite me to babysit, not to see if I could lend you money for something. When was the last time you called because you wanted to know how I was doing? He opened his mouth to answer, then closed it, then opened it again. We talk all the time. We talk about your job, your wife, your kids, your problems, your needs. When do we talk about me? Harold showed him the numbers. $47,000 over 10 years. David whistled low under his breath. Jesus, Mom, I didn't realize. None of you realized, because none of you were paying attention. You were all so busy taking that, you never stopped to think about what giving all of that was costing me. Not just financially, but emotionally. What do you mean? I mean that every time one of you called with a crisis, I put my own plans on hold to help you. Every time one of you needed money, I took it out of my own savings, my own security, my own future. I've been living like I don't matter, like my needs and dreams and wants are less important than yours, and I'm done. David was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What do you want from us, Mom?" It was the first time any of my children had asked me that question, and I wasn't prepared for how emotional it made me feel. I want you to treat me like a person instead of a resource. I want you to show interest in my life beyond what I can do for you. I want you to respect my opinions and my decisions, even when they don't benefit you directly. Okay, he said, I can do that. Can you? Because that means no more assumption that I'll babysit whenever you need it. No more last-minute requests for money. No more treating my house like a free restaurant and hotel service. It means actually listening when I talk instead of just waiting for your turn to tell me about your problems. By the time I'd finished meeting with all three of my children, it was clear that we had a lot of work to do. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of the process instead of just reacting to whatever crisis they brought to my door. The real revelation came 3 weeks later when I decided to actually visit those properties I'd inherited from Aunt Dorothy. I drove up north with Emma, who'd been spending more time with me since the dinner incident, helping me research business opportunities and asking surprisingly sophisticated questions about entrepreneurship. The properties were nothing like I'd expected. Instead of empty lots or run-down buildings, I found myself looking at 47 acres of prime real estate just outside a rapidly growing tourist town. The land included a large farmhouse in decent condition, 2 smaller buildings that could be renovated, and a view of the mountains that literally took my breath away. "Grandma," Emma said, standing next to me on the front porch of the farmhouse, "this place is incredible. What are you going to do with it?" I looked out at those mountains, at that land that belonged to me, that represented possibilities I'd never imagined, and I knew exactly what I was going to do. "I'm going to build something," I told her. "Something that's completely mine." The idea came together over the next month, like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. A culinary retreat center. A place where people could come to learn cooking techniques, food preparation, small business management. A place where I could teach everything I'd learned over 37 years of running my own business, but also learn new things myself. Emma threw herself into the project with an enthusiasm that reminded me why I'd started my original catering business all those years ago. She researched zoning laws and business permits. She designed marketing materials and social media strategies. She helped me envision a future that was exciting and challenging and completely different from anything I'd ever done before. But the real turning point came when I least expected it. I was at the grocery store, buying supplies for a test cooking class I was planning to hold at the retreat center, when I ran into Sandra. She was alone, which was unusual, and she looked terrible, thin, pale, exhausted. "Margaret," she said, and her voice was barely above a whisper. "Can we talk?" Every instinct I had told me to say no, to walk away, to protect myself from whatever manipulation or drama she was about to unleash. But something in her voice, something broken and desperate, made me stop. "What do you want, Sandra?" "I want to apologize. Really apologize. Not just say the words because Michael told me I had to." We went to a coffee shop across the street from the grocery store. Sandra ordered a black coffee and wrapped her hands around the cup like she was trying to warm herself from the inside out. "I have cancer," she said without preamble. "Ovarian cancer. I found out 2 days before that Sunday dinner at your house. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach." "Sandra, I'm not telling you this to make excuses for what I did. There is no excuse for what I did. I'm telling you because I want you to understand why I was so angry, why I said those horrible things." She took a shaky sip of her coffee. "I was terrified. I still am terrified. And I was looking at you, this strong woman who'd survived losing her husband and raised 4 kids alone and built a business from nothing. And I was so angry that you made it look easy when everything in my life felt impossible. Sandra, why didn't you tell anyone? Why didn't you ask for help? Because I didn't want to be pitied. I didn't want to be treated like I was fragile or broken. I wanted to stay strong, stay in control, keep being the person everyone expected me to be." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was the woman who'd accused me of controlling my family through money and guilt, admitting that she'd been trying to control her family through strength and independence. "What I did to you was unforgivable," she continued. "I was angry at the world, and I took it out on you because you were safe, because I knew you loved this family too much to really hurt us back. I was counting on your kindness, and I used it as a weapon against you. I sat there looking at this woman who'd humiliated me in my own home, who'd changed the course of my entire life with one disgusting gesture, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. I felt sorry for her. Sandra, what's your prognosis? Good, if I respond well to treatment. The doctors think they caught it early, but the chemotherapy..." She gestured vaguely at her appearance. "It's been rough." We sat in silence for a few minutes. Finally, I said, "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm dying, Margaret. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but I'm facing my own mortality in a way I never have before. And I realized that the worst thing about dying wouldn't be leaving my children. It would be leaving them with the memory of who I was in that dining room. I don't want that to be my legacy. What do you want your legacy to be? I want them to remember that I was brave enough to admit when I was wrong. I want them to remember that I respected the woman who raised the man I married, who gave me a family I didn't deserve." I looked at Sandra, really looked at her, and I saw something I'd never seen before. I saw fear and regret and genuine remorse. I saw a woman who was facing the possibility of losing everything and had finally understood what really mattered. "Sandra, I accept your apology. But accepting your apology doesn't mean things go back to the way they were. I know. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect to be welcomed back into your life. I just needed you to know that I understand what I did, and I'm sorry." I drove home from that coffee shop with my head spinning. Everything I thought I knew about that Sunday dinner, about Sandra's motivations, about the trajectory of the past 2 months, had been turned upside down. But what surprised me most was that knowing about Sandra's illness didn't change how I felt about the choices I'd made since that day. I still didn't want to go back to being the family bank. I still didn't want to accept disrespect in exchange for feeling needed. I still wanted to build something of my own, for myself. The difference was that now I understood that hurt people hurt people. Sandra's cruelty hadn't been about me, not really. It had been about her own fear and anger and feeling of powerlessness. That didn't excuse what she'd done, but it explained it in a way that made it easier to let go of the anger I'd been carrying. That evening, I called Michael. "Michael, I know about Sandra's illness." Silence on the other end. Then quietly, "She told you?" "She did." "Why didn't you tell me?" "She made me promise not to. She didn't want people to treat her differently, to make allowances for her behavior because she was sick." "Michael, I want you to bring Sandra to the house on Sunday. Just the 3 of us. We need to talk." "Mom, are you sure? She's really fragile right now, and if you're planning to, I'm not planning to hurt her, Michael. I'm planning to help her understand how we can move forward from here. That Sunday conversation changed everything, but not in the way any of us expected. Sandra came prepared for me to unleash months of anger and resentment. Instead, I offered her something she hadn't expected. Sandra, I'm opening a culinary retreat center up north. I'm going to need help with marketing, with managing social media, with coordinating events. It's part-time work, flexible hours, something you could do from home during your treatment. She stared at me. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance to contribute to something positive instead of dwelling on something negative. I'm offering you a way to be part of my future instead of trapped in our past. Michael looked back and forth between us like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Why would you do that? Sandra asked. Because holding on to anger hurts me more than it hurts you. Because I believe people can change and grow and become better than their worst moments. And because despite everything that's happened, you're still part of this family, and I still believe in giving people second chances. That was 18 months ago. Sandra's cancer is in remission now. The Culinary Retreat Center is booked solid through next year. Emma graduated high school early and is working with me full-time while she takes business classes online. My other children have learned to manage their own financial emergencies and treat me like a person instead of a service provider. But the most important thing that's changed is how I see myself. I'm not just someone's mother or grandmother or financial backup plan. I'm Margaret Sullivan, entrepreneur, teacher, business owner. I'm a woman who survived the worst humiliation of her life and used it as the foundation for building the best years of her life. Last Sunday, we had our first family dinner in my new house up north, the farmhouse I renovated as part of the retreat center. Sandra helped me cook. Emma served as sous chef. My children actually asked me questions about my business, my plans, my dreams. And when Sandra accidentally knocked over her water glass, splashing water across the table, we all laughed. Because sometimes the things that seem like the end of the world are actually just the beginning of something better.